each of those changes is not random. None of those changes is random. Each is adapting the technique to the soil, the climate.
Well, you know, and what they, you know, I remember once there was a weed that seemed like it was causing harm to the crop. It was inhibiting it in some way, and I asked the farmer, well, what's it doing? He said, oh, it's heating the soil, which is hurting the corn. And we took a thermometer and stuck it out there, and there wasn't any difference. But later on, we did studies that showed that plant was actually producing chemicals that was releasing into the soil that was affecting the corn. So there's a scientific basis, you know, as to why it happened. Do we need to know that science? I say yes, because combining it with the observation, the experience of the people, with our understanding of the mechanism, we have a much better understanding of how to put the two together so that it works to the advantage for the farmer.
Well, you may need to know the science. He may not need to know the science.
Well, he has a different science. It's an empirical, local science,
Right.
you know, type of knowledge. I remember one time, too, we thought that if we go out and interview some of the farmers about which were their worst weeds, the malezas, más malas, you know, and the poor student that went out there with his little interview sheet and stuff, and he asked the farmer, the first one he came to, he said, which are your worst weeds? And the farmer turned to him and said, you know that word weed, we don't use it. It's all monte, which is kind of green stuff. And there's buen monte and there's mal monte. And we manage it accordingly. There's some that actually switch back and forth between the two. And all had to do with use and interaction and impact and stuff that they had observed over many, many years. So that happened real early in the time I was working in southern Mexico, and it was probably a big impact on how we approach these systems after that.
You touched on this. I'd like you to unpack it a little bit for me, and I think some other people too. Organic is not necessarily agroecological. Agroecology is not necessarily organic. Organic is not necessarily sustainable. Agroecology is as close as can be to sustainable. Can you run through some of that a little bit?
I like to think of organic as a way of farming. And we can look at it agroecologically and understand the mechanisms of its work, of its functioning, you know, and the dynamics of the soil and the interactions of insects and how weeds may be an integral part of the system. Some are good and some aren't. And which mixtures work best and which don't, and what kinds of rotations and cover crops. And all the organic practices can tell me how that agroecosystem is organized and how it's functioning. The agroecology piece can get in and look at the structure and function of that system being managed organically. So organic is a way to apply agroecology for me. Just as permaculture is another way to apply agroecology with a different approach and a different arrangement of species and a different goal in the end. See, the agroecology focus is a food system approach from the seed and the soil all the way to the table and everything in between. We're looking at not just what's going on the farm, but what's going on elsewhere in the food system as food moves from the farm through processing, through marketing, to consumption, and then potentially back again, you know, if we really want to close food system cycles. So we don't get trapped by certifications that say, well, that's organic, it must be good. You got to go behind the label, behind the certification, and really look at all the elements of what that system needs in order to truly be sustainable, from, again, the seed and the soil all the way to the table. Just as I've seen the organic, you know, who's the biggest marketer of organic produce in the world right now? 25% of the volume of the market, more or less? Walmart. And are the farmers getting a fair price? Are the workers in those fields getting treated well, making a living wage? Is it creating opportunity for young people in getting into agriculture? These are all questions that I bet.
Is it sustainable?
Yeah. Would tell you that that's not a sustainable system.
Last question for me, and then we'll open it to students. is there a better word? Is there a better word than agroecology? So, because sometimes I think, first of all, I guess the good thing about agroecology is it hasn't been co-opted like everything else. But A, it doesn't trip off the tongue, and B, it takes a lot of explanation. And I wonder if, I mean, we have a lot of real geniuses in this room, so maybe someone else will come up with something, but, and I'm sure you've thought about this long and hard, but I wonder if there isn't something, it's not only a marketing question, it's an understanding question.
I don't think there's a better word. What's needed is better understanding of the roots of that word, where it comes from, what it integrates, and the impact it can have. To me, it's something I call transdisciplinary. It links different ways of knowing. It's a holistic way of thinking, like ecology itself. And there's really no better word than ecology for understanding nature. Just like I don't think there's any better way to understand food systems than agroecology because of its holistic approach. It's a matter of learning how to use it. And that's why in some of the work we're doing now, it's important to define agroecology in all three of those areas that I mentioned: science, practice, and social change, and ensure that all three are there. Because it would be really easy to just do the science, you know, and work on some small little organism that's a problem and find a way to eliminate it and call it agroecology. But if it's not linked to practice, if it wasn't something farmers wanted to have done, and it didn't contribute to improving the sustainability of the whole system, it's not agroecology. So a lot of it's, to me, you know, learning how to use the term. And I'm seeing it as people talk about agroecological practices, you know, like just in the last few years, as important. And seeming to have an understanding of what they are without having to define them. And it's something more than organic. It's something more than what we've than what we've worked with. And what it needs, though, is that continued focus on sustainability of all components of the food system.
Is there broad agreement among people who call themselves agroecologists? Everyone would, all would pretty much agree with what you just said?
The ones that I would call agroecologists, yes.
But for example, without getting too crazy about it, if I asked Olivier that question,
yeah,
he would say yeah.
He would say yes.
Okay. If I asked Ricardo that question, he would say yeah.
I think he would.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, Ricardo?
All
right.
Questions? I don't know. How are we doing this? We have microphones. We only have one. Well, I don't need this. So we have two microphones and